When the person you trust the most hands your heart to someone who isn't you, you learn very quickly that silence is not strength, action is. There are moments in life when betrayal doesn't knock. It detonates. One phone call, one message, one unexpected detail can flip your entire world upside down. And when that moment came for me, when I found out that my husband didn't just travel for business, but traveled with his assistant, everything inside me snapped into a truth I had ignored for far too long. What follows isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of recognizing your worth, taking your power back, and refusing to let someone else write the narrative of your life. If you've ever felt undervalued, unseen, or disrespected in a relationship, you need to hear this to the very end. Because this is not about him, this is about you, and what you're capable of when you finally choose yourself. There comes a day when the excuses stop sounding like reasons and start sounding like insults. A day when the things you brushed off, the things you told yourself were normal, suddenly reveal themselves for exactly what they are: disrespect packaged as routine. That day came for me when I learned that my husband, who had sworn loyalty, partnership, and love, decided to take a trip, not alone, not for work, but with his assistant. Not that the title matters. What matters is the betrayal. What matters is the choice. What matters is that he thought I wouldn't do anything about it. Because people only treat you how you allow them to. And for too long, I allowed silence to be my language. I allowed patience to be my shield. I allowed forgiveness to be my reflex. But silence isn't strength when it protects the wrong person. Patience isn't virtue when it excuses the inexcusable. And forgiveness isn't healing when it's given to someone who has no intention of changing. So I made a decision, the kind of decision that rewrites your life in real time. I sold his car, the one he polished more than our relationship. The one he reminded me he worked hard for, as if my sacrifices weren't currency. Then I froze his accounts, the ones he told me were complicated, the ones he said I didn't need to worry about. Suddenly, he had a reason to worry, and while he was busy wondering why his card wasn't swiping, I was busy filing for divorce. Not out of spite, but out of clarity, out of truth, out of a long overdue understanding that I deserved more than the bare minimum disguised as effort. And let me be very clear, this isn't a story about revenge. Revenge is fueled by anger. What I did was fueled by awakening. The kind of awakening that hits you the moment you realize someone has been counting on your loyalty while giving you nothing but their leftovers. The moment you realize your love has been stretched thin trying to cover the gaps their integrity should have filled. The moment you realize that staying is more painful than leaving. People will call you dramatic when your boundaries finally have teeth. They'll call you cold when you choose peace over chaos. They'll call you selfish when you stop bleeding for someone who never once offered you a bandage. But they won't call you wrong because deep down they know the truth. You were never the problem. Your tolerance was. When I took action, I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was finally trying to save myself. I was closing a chapter that had expired long before I admitted it. I was reclaiming my voice, my strength, my future. And here's the part many people won't say out loud. It felt freeing. Not because of what I did, but because of what I stopped doing, accepting less, shrinking myself, pretending things were fine just to keep the peace in a place where there was no peace. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe there's a part of you that knows exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe your situation isn't identical, but the feeling is, the pain is, the confusion is. And the truth is this: sometimes the most powerful decision you can make is to walk away, not to punish someone else, but to honor yourself. You are not obligated to stay in spaces where you are disrespected. You are not required to tolerate anything that destroys your spirit. You are not responsible for fixing someone who breaks you. You are allowed to choose yourself, and when you do, your entire life shifts. Doors open where there were walls, strength shows up where there was fear, clarity appears where there was doubt. And you realize that the thing you were most afraid of leaving is the thing that finally sets you free. Your value is non-negotiable, and the moment someone treats you like an option, your only responsibility is to remove yourself from the table. Because the truth is, people don't always downgrade you because you aren't worthy. They downgrade you because they assume you won't leave. They assume your loyalty will keep you bound. They assume your heart will override your logic. They assume your patience will stretch indefinitely. And for a while, maybe it does. Maybe you keep showing up, giving chances, explaining your needs, hoping they will finally understand, finally change, finally see you. But eventually you learn that someone who refuses to value you will always find a way to normalize their disrespect and disguise it as misunderstanding, busyness, or excuses that sound polished but feel empty. You learn that love doesn't need to hurt to be real, and respect doesn't need to be begged for to be given. You learn that the moment you feel like you're competing with someone else for your own place in a relationship, you're no longer in a relationship, you're in an auction. And your worth is not up for bidding. There is nothing empowering about shrinking yourself just to fit into a space someone else has made too small for you. There is nothing noble about accepting crumbs while pretending it's a feast simply because you're afraid of eating alone. Too many people stay in places where they are barely tolerated, hoping that someday they'll be celebrated, hoping that loyalty will soften someone's ego, hoping that consistency will wake up someone's conscience. But the harsh truth is this: when someone has gotten comfortable with you undervaluing yourself, they will never voluntarily raise their standard of treatment. They will never suddenly become who you deserved all along simply because you stayed long enough. People change when they feel the loss of your presence, not the certainty of it. When someone treats you like an option, it means they are not worried about losing you. It means they expect you to be there no matter how deeply they cut, how often they dismiss, how easily they replace your importance. It means they believe you will accept explanations instead of accountability, apologies instead of effort, promises instead of change. And the longer you stay, the more you reinforce their belief. The more you teach them that your boundaries are flexible, your tolerance is high, and your expectations can be negotiated down to whatever is most convenient for them. But your value is not a contract someone can edit. It is not a price someone can negotiate. It is not a role someone can downgrade based on their mood, temptations, or insecurities. Your value stands whether they see it or not. And the moment they fail to see it is the moment you must remind them by walking away. Removing yourself from the table is not about revenge, spite, or proving a point. It's about reclaiming your dignity. It's about recognizing that staying where you are not valued drains you, diminishes you, and slowly convinces you to forget your own worth. It's about understanding that it is better to stand alone in your truth than sit in a room where your presence is taken for granted. It is not your job to teach someone how to appreciate you. It is not your responsibility to convince someone that you deserve love, loyalty, and respect. The moment you start convincing, you have already lost yourself in the process. The right person won't need persuasion. They will see your value from the beginning, not after you've suffered to prove it. And there's something powerful that happens when you finally decide to walk away from a situation where you were treated like an option. You start to breathe differently. You start to think differently. You start to reconnect with the parts of yourself you abandoned just to keep the peace. You start to realize that the fear of leaving was far louder than the reality of it. Because leaving doesn't break you, staying somewhere you're not valued does. Staying fractures your self-esteem in tiny, unnoticeable ways until one day you wake up unable to recognize the person in the mirror. Leaving, though painful, is clarity. It is strength. It is the moment you choose yourself over someone's indecision, disrespect, or inconsistency. You don't need to be anyone's second choice, backup plan, or emotional placeholder. You don't need to wait to be chosen when you can choose yourself. And choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's a declaration that you will no longer settle for love that feels like guessing, respect that feels conditional, or loyalty that expires when convenience changes. Promise to your future your f. Yuv t that you are self-love that you fake crelife. A we tuerlife, where, loved without competing, irreglow against the morning, risked without questioning, and chosen without hesitation. Because at the end of the day, your value is non-negotiable, and the second someone forgets that, you are allowed to stand up, step back, and walk away without apologizing for the space you're reclaiming, and the peace you're protecting. Action is the loudest language you will ever speak, because silence, though peaceful, often becomes the shelter where mistreatment hides. Silence can feel noble, it can feel patient, it can feel mature, but silence in the wrong place becomes a permission slip for someone to keep doing exactly what they know is hurting you. There is a point where quiet understanding turns into quiet suffering, and people who benefit from your silence will always encourage you to remain silent. They will call you calm when you're actually hurting, loyal when you're actually overlooked, forgiving when you're actually drained. That is why action matters. That is why your decisions carry more weight than your explanations. That is why walking away, setting boundaries, saying no, choosing peace, demanding accountability, those things speak volumes in ways words never will. People learn who you are not by what you promise, but by what you refuse to tolerate. You can say you deserve better 1,000 times, but if you stay where you're being mistreated, your actions will contradict your words. You can explain your worth, but if you allow someone to treat you like you're disposable, your behavior will teach them that your worth is negotiable. You can express your standards, but if you never enforce them, those standards become suggestions instead of boundaries. And people who want to benefit from your softness will gladly treat your boundaries like suggestions. That is why there comes a moment when talking is no longer enough, when explanations no longer matter, when you cannot heal in the same environment that hurt you, when the only way to reclaim your self-respect is through decisive action. Action is powerful because it disrupts patterns. Words don't. Words can be comforting, distracting, delaying, manipulative. Words can be misunderstood or misused, but action is unmistakable. When you stop responding to what drains you, the pattern stops. When you stop giving chances to someone who keeps proving they don't deserve them, the pattern stops. When you stop arguing over the same issue and instead choose to walk away, the pattern stops. When you stop waiting for someone to change and instead choose to change your environment, the pattern stops. Your life shifts not when you talk about change, but when you act on it. And the truth is, people are often far more afraid of your actions than your words. They aren't afraid of you telling them you're hurt, they're afraid of you leaving. They aren't afraid of you saying you deserve better, they're afraid of you enforcing it. They aren't afraid of your disappointment, they're afraid of losing access to you. They aren't afraid of you confronting them, they're afraid of you outgrowing them. That's why some people don't change when you express your needs. They change when your absence forces them to confront a life without your effort, your love, your support, your presence. But even then, you must be careful not to confuse their fear of losing you with genuine respect for you. Real respect shows up in action long before it shows up in fear. Taking action doesn't make you heartless. It makes you honest. It makes you aligned with your truth. It makes you responsible for your own well-being. It means you refuse to wait for someone else to fix what they broke, or to finally realize your value after they've treated you carelessly. It means you've stopped hoping for change and started creating your own. Taking action means you're no longer living in potential, promises, or wishful thinking. You're living in reality, and in reality, people show you how they feel through how they treat you. You can decode mixed signals all you want, but actions will always reveal the truth, no matter how pretty the lies sound. And sometimes the hardest action you'll ever take is choosing to let go. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized that caring alone won't save something that's already sinking. Sometimes the bravest action you'll ever take is deciding to start over. Not because you wanted to, but because staying would cost you more than leaving ever could. Sometimes the most necessary action is choosing distance not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Because you cannot heal around people who keep reopening your wounds, and you cannot grow around people who fear your growth. When you start acting instead of explaining, you begin to take your power back. You stop needing validation. You stop asking for closure. You stop waiting for apologies that will never come. You stop trying to convince someone to give you what you already deserve. You stop giving discounts to people who have no intention of paying full price for your loyalty, your energy, your time, your heart. And gradually, you rediscover your strength. You rediscover your clarity. You rediscover the version of you that existed before disappointment dimmed your light. Action is not loud because it shouts. It's loud because it ends cycles. It's loud because it detaches you from what was never meant to stay. It's loud because it shifts your life toward alignment, self-respect, and peace. And once you learn the power of acting on what you know instead of ignoring what you feel, you'll never again allow someone to confuse your silence with acceptance and your kindness with weakness. Walking away is not weakness. It is the ultimate declaration of self, worth, strength, and clarity, because leaving something that is hurting you takes far more courage than staying somewhere that is slowly draining your spirit. People often confuse endurance with strength. They praise you for holding on, for being patient, for trying again, for forgiving one more time, but they forget that endurance can turn into self-abandonment when you stay in a place that required you to shrink a little more each day. They forget that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go, not because you wanted to, but because staying was costing you pieces of yourself you could no longer afford to lose. There is a moment in every relationship, romantic, family, friendship, when you realize the love you are giving is no longer being matched, when your effort is carrying the entire weight of connection, when your heart has become a bandage for someone else's wounds while your own remain ignored. At first, you try harder, you give more, you explain, you adjust, you compromise until you're bending so far that you barely recognize the shape of your own needs anymore. You convince yourself that loyalty means staying no matter how painful it becomes. But the truth is, loyalty without reciprocity is self-destruction. Love without respect is emptiness. Commitment without effort from both sides is captivity disguised as devotion. When you walk away, it's not because you failed. It's because you finally understood that healing cannot happen in the same environment that broke you. You walk away because you refuse to keep pouring your energy into a place that has stopped feeding your soul. You walk away because you know that sacrificing your peace for someone else's comfort is not love. It's a slow erosion of your identity. You walk away because you recognize that staying is not saving the relationship. It's simply prolonging the loneliness you've been feeling even when they were right beside you. People will judge you for leaving before they judge someone for giving you reasons to leave. They'll call you heartless for protecting your peace. They'll say you gave up too soon, even if you held on far longer than you should have. They'll whisper about your choices without knowing the nights you spent convincing yourself things would get better, the tears you cried in silence, the pieces of yourself you kept offering hoping someone would finally see your worth. They'll talk, but their voices don't matter because they weren't the ones living inside your pain. They weren't the ones waking up every day wondering why love felt like a burden instead of a blessing. Walking away is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about returning to yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were neglected, suppressed, or forgotten. It's about understanding that you deserve a life where you don't have to question your value, where you don't have to beg for consistency, where you don't have to tolerate effort disguised as affection. When you walk away, you are choosing to honor your own heart after someone else mishandled it. You are choosing to protect your own future after someone proved they couldn't be trusted with it. You are choosing to rewrite your own story instead of being trapped in a chapter that was killing you slowly. And the beautiful thing about walking away is that it creates space for clarity, space for growth, space for peace. It allows you to see things from a distance, to recognize patterns you couldn't see while you were drowning inside them. It helps you understand how much of your suffering came from trying to control what was never in your power. It teaches you that some people love the idea of you more than the responsibility of loving you. It reveals who was truly meant for you and who was meant to teach you. And most importantly, it shows you that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. Strength isn't about how tightly you hold on. Strength is knowing when to loosen your grip. Strength is understanding that you cannot force someone to value you. Strength is realizing that love is not supposed to feel like constantly proving your worth. Strength is walking away even when your heart is still attached, because you know your soul deserves better. Strength is letting go of what you wanted so you can make room for what you deserve. And yes, it hurts. Leaving hurts, detaching hurts, accepting the truth hurts. But the pain of walking away is temporary compared to the lifelong suffering of staying in a situation that diminishes you. Pain has a purpose when it leads you somewhere healthier, somewhere safer, somewhere more aligned with who you are becoming. But when pain becomes the foundation of a relationship, that is not love. That is captivity, and you are not meant to live in emotional captivity. You deserve a love that chooses you freely, not out of habit or convenience. You deserve a relationship where peace is normal, not a rare moment. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel valued, not someone who makes you feel replaceable. And if walking away is what it takes to find that, then walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. Because sometimes the only way to win is to walk away from the table where you were never being served what your heart truly needed. You do not lose anything by leaving disrespect. You only lose yourself by staying in it, because every moment you spend in an environment that belittles your worth chips away at who you are, what you believe in, and what you deserve. People often think that walking away means forfeiting something valuable, a relationship, a family, a history, a future they once imagined, but the truth is, anything built on disrespect is already lost. Anything built on dishonesty is already broken. Anything built on inconsistency is already collapsing. And the only thing you truly risk losing by leaving is the pain you've been carrying for far too long. Staying in a place where you are disrespected teaches your heart to settle, your mind to doubt, and your soul to shrink. You start normalizing things that were never normal. You start tolerating behaviors you once swore you would never accept. You start adjusting your standards downward just to avoid conflict or disappointment. You start convincing yourself that maybe this is just how love works. Maybe this is just how relationships are. Maybe you're asking for too much when really you're asking for the bare minimum. That's what disrespect does. It slowly convinces you to question your own expectations while excusing someone else's lack of effort. The longer you stay, the more you begin to internalize the disrespect. You begin to think their actions reflect your value, when in reality they reflect their character. You begin to believe that you're hard to love, when the truth is you're simply loving the wrong person. You begin to feel guilty for wanting more, when wanting more is the very sign that your soul still remembers what it deserves. Disrespect doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in dismissive tone, broken promises, emotional absence, or the subtle way someone stops choosing you. But quiet disrespect is just as damaging as loud disrespect, because it weakens you slowly, silently, invisibly. And the saddest part is that many people stay because they fear the unknown more than they fear losing themselves. They fear loneliness more than they fear continual disrespect. They fear starting over more than they fear slowly dying inside a relationship that no longer nourishes them. They hold on because of memories, because of time invested, because of comfort, because of hope. But time invested does not equal a future promised. Memories do not override mistreatment. Comfort does not excuse emotional neglect. And hope is not a strategy when someone has shown you repeatedly who they are. Leaving disrespect is not losing. It is choosing. Choosing yourself, choosing your peace. Choosing the future version of you who will look back and thank you for walking away instead of staying stuck. When you leave disrespect, you reclaim your voice, the voice you silenced just to keep the relationship from falling apart. When you leave, you reclaim your confidence, the confidence that was slowly dimmed by someone who couldn't appreciate your light. When you leave, you reclaim your identity, the identity that grew blurry while you kept trying to mold yourself into whatever would keep the peace. And something powerful happens when you finally walk away. Clarity returns. You begin to see the situation for what it was, not what you hoped it would be. You start recognizing the patterns you ignored. You start understanding the lies you accepted. You start realizing how long you were settling for something far beneath what your heart was capable of giving and deserving. You start feeling the weight that lifts when you stop carrying a connection that was never balanced. You start seeing yourself again stronger, wiser, clearer. Leaving disrespect teaches you lessons that staying never could. It teaches you that you can survive without what once terrified you to lose. It teaches you that your worth does not depend on someone else's validation. It teaches you that love without respect is the slowest form of suffocation. It teaches you that boundaries are not walls. They are doors that protect your peace. It teaches you that self-respect is not optional. It is essential. And most importantly, it teaches you that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred. You do not lose the person who disrespected you. You lose the illusion you had built around them. You lose the dream you created, not the reality you were living. You lose the version of them you hoped they would become, not the one they actually were. And even though that loss may hurt, it is a necessary hurt, because it clears space for something healthier, for someone who will love you not just when it's easy, but when it requires effort, accountability, and consistency. What you truly lose when you stay in disrespect is far more damaging. You lose your joy, you lose your peace, you lose your identity, you lose your trust in yourself, you lose your standards. You lose your emotional safety. You lose the future you could have had if you had chosen to step away. Staying isn't noble when it destroys you. Staying isn't loyal when it breaks your spirit. Staying isn't love when it costs you your own heart. Walking away is not about giving up. It's about letting go of what was never holding you with care. It's about releasing what was only weighing you down. It's about choosing to heal instead of choosing to hurt. You do not lose anything by leaving disrespect. The only loss comes from remaining where you are not valued, not respected, and not truly seen.